The city of Cali lay quietly under a velvet dusk, its streets bathed in the soft amber glow of streetlights that flickered like distant stars. From above, the sprawling neighborhood seemed peaceful, ordinary, unassuming, yet beneath the surface, a network of influence and power moved silently, like currents under a placid lake. In this city, one man's mind orchestrated a symphony of control, a careful, patient strategy that allowed him to rule without fanfare or flash. This man was Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela, a figure whose life would become both legend and cautionary tale, earning him the nickname, the chess player, among those who dared whisper his name. Gilberto was not the type to storm into a room with the roar of violence or the glare of notoriety. Instead, he observed. He calculated. He waited. Each decision was a move on a vast board, a game that spanned continents and oceans. To understand him, one had to step into the quiet corridors of his mind, to feel the weight of patience and foresight, and to realize that in a world obsessed with spectacle and immediate action, sometimes the quietest man casts the longest shadow. It is tempting to imagine the world of the drug trade as a kaleidoscope of explosions, sirens, and brazen shootings, a theater of constant chaos. But Gilberto's empire was built differently. He moved with a subtle hand, shaping his surroundings with discretion rather than force. Banks, pharmacies, and radio stations became pieces on his chessboard, carefully positioned to secure both wealth and influence. He understood that control need not scream, it could whisper, insidiously weaving itself into the fabric of society. And in this quiet, deliberate way, he rose, almost unnoticed, until the world realized the scale of what had been built in the shadows. The story of Gilberto's life begins long before the days of international cocaine trafficking, long before the velvet-suited businessmen and the silent phone calls that commanded shipments across oceans. It begins in the heart of Colombia, in a small town where he was born, and in a family that, like many, sought survival and opportunity in a country shaped by both beauty and hardship. These early years would lay the foundation for a mind that could see multiple steps ahead, a mind that would later be both revered and feared by friends, enemies, and law enforcement alike. Even as a young man, Gilberto exhibited a quiet intensity, a sharpness that marked him apart from his peers. He watched, he listened, he calculated, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity and ambition. The streets of Cali, with their mixture of commerce, tradition, and the occasional threat of violence, became his training ground. He learned the subtle dance of influence, the value of patience, and the power of perception. In the calm of evening, walking along quiet avenues or observing the activity from a small café, he began to understand the intricate balances of power, trust, and fear. There is something hypnotic about watching a master at work, and Gilberto's life offers that sense of quiet awe. Unlike the flamboyant figures of his era, who sought to dominate through sheer presence and intimidation, he preferred to manipulate the flow of events without drawing attention. Deals were made in hushed tones, alliances forged over whispered conversations, and loyalty cultivated through subtle persuasion rather than overt threats. It is in this quiet manipulation that his genius became apparent, a genius that could create vast empires while maintaining an appearance of normalcy. As night deepened, the city seemed to exhale, the distant sounds of life softening into a rhythm almost like a heartbeat. And yet, even in this calm, the world of commerce and crime moved inexorably forward. Shipments were organized, contacts were managed, and strategies plotted across continents. The chessboard of the globe was set, and Gilberto was always several moves ahead, anticipating the reactions of rivals, allies, and the forces of law enforcement. There was a serene precision in this orchestration, a careful choreography that made the empire resilient and remarkably difficult to dismantle. To listen to the story of Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela is to appreciate the art of patience, the subtlety of influence, and the quiet intensity of strategic thinking. It is a story that unfolds not in bursts of violence or sensational headlines, but in the delicate interplay of observation, calculation, and foresight. For those who follow this tale, there is both a fascination and a warning. Immense power can be held without shouting, yet the larger the empire, the more delicate the balance. And in the quiet moments, one begins to wonder, what drives a man to seek such control, and how does he rest while holding the weight of a world in his hands? As we drift into the deeper hours of the evening, let us imagine the city of Cali, the soft hum of distant traffic, and a man moving silently through his domain. His story is not just one of crime, but of intellect, ambition, and the endless interplay between patience and risk. And as the night stretches on, we prepare to follow him through the twists of life, the rise to power, the shadows of rivalry, and the quiet moments where even the most formidable mind must confront the consequences of its choices. The board is set, the pieces are in motion, and the game has only just begun. Long before the world came to know Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela as a master strategist and kingpin of the Cali Cartel, he was a boy born on January 30, 1939, in the quiet town of Mariquita, nestled in Colombia's Tolima region. Mariquita was a place of simple rhythms, mornings filled with the distant tolling of church bells, afternoons heavy with the scent of sugarcane and earth warmed by the tropical sun, and evenings softened by the lull of cicadas singing in the trees. It was in this serene, unassuming setting that the foundations of Gilberto's mind were quietly being laid. His family was modest, anchored by his father, a painter, who spent hours perfecting his craft, and his mother, who managed the household with a calm resilience. Life in Mariquita was not easy, resources were limited, and opportunity required patience and cleverness. It was here, in the soft routines of small-town life, that Gilberto first observed patterns, the ebb and flow of people's behavior, the subtle give and take of influence, the ways in which one's position in the social fabric could determine access to resources. These early observations, almost imperceptible at the time, would later translate into the skills that allowed him to manipulate a global network of commerce and crime. As a boy, Gilberto was quiet and deliberate. He did not rush into adventures or reckless games, instead, he watched. He listened. He asked questions and filed away answers, often noticing details that others overlooked. His education was unremarkable in conventional terms. He did not excel in classrooms filled with rote learning, but he excelled in understanding the world around him, reading people with an acuity that would become legendary. Even as a teenager, he showed an intuitive grasp of negotiation, patience, and strategy. The same calm temperament that allowed him to observe the world would later become the hallmark of his rise to power. By the time his family moved to Cali, Gilberto was entering adolescence, stepping into a city brimming with energy, commerce, and possibility. Cali in the 1950s and 1960s was a city in transition, streets lined with modest homes and small businesses, marketplaces teeming with life, the distant hum of industry blending with the rhythms of daily life. For a young man like Gilberto, the city was both opportunity and challenge, a place where ambition could flourish, but where missteps could be costly. It was here, amidst the bustling neighborhoods and growing commercial activity, that Gilberto first began to understand the subtle interplay between risk and reward. He left formal schooling at the age of 15, driven not by rebellion but by necessity and pragmatism. Work became his classroom, and the city itself became his teacher. His first job was in a pharmacy, a place where he observed transactions, studied human behavior, and learned the value of trust and discretion. Behind the counters and shelves, he saw more than pills and prescriptions. He saw patterns, opportunities, and the ways in which small decisions could ripple into larger consequences. It was in these quiet moments, stocking shelves and interacting with customers, that he began to understand the mechanics of commerce, influence, and human desire. The streets of Cali offered lessons that no classroom could provide. He watched as local merchants navigated competition with careful strategy, as neighbors negotiated favors and debts with subtlety, and as power quietly shifted between families and factions without overt confrontation. Gilberto absorbed these lessons like a sponge, cultivating patience and foresight. He learned the value of observing before acting, of choosing when to speak and when to remain silent. In his mind, each encounter, each transaction, was a potential move on a board he had not yet revealed, a board that would one day span continents. During this period, he also forged connections that would later become crucial. His brother Miguel, a figure equally intelligent and ambitious, became his confidant and partner in enterprise. Together, They began to explore ways to expand beyond the immediate constraints of legitimate work, gradually stepping into ventures that blurred the line between lawful commerce and clandestine opportunity. These early steps were subtle, almost imperceptible, but they laid the groundwork for a network that would later grow into one of the most powerful criminal organizations in history. There was a quiet tension in these years, a sense of ambition tempered by caution. Gilberto understood, even in youth, that patience was a form of power, and that a carefully calculated path often led to greater rewards than reckless bravado. He observed how impulsive acts could draw attention, invite danger, and disrupt carefully laid plans. In this calm, reflective approach, he differentiated himself from others who sought immediate recognition or quick gains. The seeds of the chess player mindset were being sown, an approach that favored long-term strategy over short-term spectacle. Cali, with its mix of opportunity and subtle menace, became the canvas for his emerging vision. Even as he navigated the practical demands of work, family obligations, and societal expectations, Gilberto was learning to anticipate, to manipulate, and to plan. The quiet streets at dawn, the marketplace's gentle hustle, the evening shadows stretching across tiled rooftops, all of these experiences contributed to a nuanced understanding of control, timing, and influence. Each day was a lesson in human behavior, each interaction a potential insight, each observation a step toward the empire he would one day command. By the time he reached early adulthood, Gilberto had transformed from a quiet, observant boy into a man with vision, discipline, and an uncanny ability to see patterns where others saw chaos. He had mastered the art of moving unnoticed, of building relationships and alliances with subtlety, and of anticipating outcomes with precision. The calm, reflective patience that defined these formative years would become the foundation upon which the Cali Cartel was constructed. And though the world around him remained largely unaware of the quiet force emerging from its midst, the stage was set for the remarkable ascent of a man who would come to be known not for his violence, but for his intelligence, foresight, and strategic genius. As night settles over the city, the hum of life continues quietly, and we leave Gilberto at the threshold of adulthood, a young man with ambition coiled like a spring, patience etched into his every thought, and the first glimpses of a mind that would one day play a global game few could even imagine. The journey from this modest beginning to the pinnacle of power is about to unfold, move by calculated move, in a story that is as much about intellect and strategy as it is about crime and consequence. As Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela moved from adolescence into young adulthood, the city of Cali became more than just a backdrop, it became both his classroom and his laboratory. The quiet streets, the bustling marketplaces, and the occasional whispers of corruption all offered lessons in human nature and opportunity. Gilberto had already learned the subtle power of observation, patience, and strategic thinking, but now he was ready to put those lessons into practice, testing the boundaries between legitimate work and the clandestine opportunities that whispered from the shadows. His first ventures were small, almost imperceptible, and seemed innocent enough to an outside observer. Working in a pharmacy had taught him about inventory, trust, and the careful management of resources. He applied these lessons to ventures that skirted the edges of legality, small-scale contraband, loans with high-interest returns, and the discreet movement of goods. Nothing flashy, nothing violent, yet each step allowed him to understand the mechanics of commerce, power, and influence in a way that schoolbooks never could. Every transaction, every quiet negotiation, was a practice move on the larger board he would one day command. Gilberto was not alone in this journey. His brother Miguel, equally clever and ambitious, joined him in these early enterprises. The two of them complemented one another, Gilberto with his measured patience and ability to foresee outcomes, Miguel with his charisma and ability to manage people. Together, they began to understand a fundamental truth that would guide their lives: it was not brute force, but strategy, discretion, and careful planning that ensured longevity and success. And so, their first steps into the criminal world were calculated, deliberate, and almost invisible, a stark contrast to the chaos and violence that characterized other groups at the time. The young men observed the city carefully, noting patterns of police patrols, the routines of business owners, and the flows of goods through the streets and ports. They began to see opportunities where others saw obstacles. A shipment arriving at the docks, a merchant seeking quick cash, or a corrupt official seeking a discreet favor, each became a potential piece in a larger game. These early operations were modest, often involving small amounts of contraband or the occasional smuggling of goods from one part of the city to another. But each successful move reinforced their understanding of leverage, trust, and the art of calculated risk. It was also during this time that Gilberto began to understand the importance of alliances. The streets of Cali were a network of families, small businesses, and informal power structures. Navigating this network required diplomacy, discretion, and foresight. Gilberto learned how to build relationships without appearing to dominate, how to offer incentives without seeming manipulative, and how to extract loyalty without demanding it overtly. These skills, subtle and quiet, would later define the operations of the Cali Cartel and set it apart from rival organizations that relied on fear and spectacle. By the mid-1960s, the young brothers were already developing a reputation for cleverness and reliability. They were known to solve problems quietly, to make profitable deals without attracting unnecessary attention, and to handle disputes with a mix of firmness and subtle persuasion. Their style contrasted sharply with other aspiring criminals who sought recognition through violence or ostentation. Gilberto understood that to survive, and ultimately to thrive, one had to remain invisible while simultaneously controlling the flow of events. The chessboard metaphor, already implicit in his approach, was becoming increasingly literal in the way he conducted his affairs. The gradual expansion of their activities also required careful management of trust. Every partnership, every transaction, carried the risk of betrayal or exposure. Gilberto learned to vet associates, to cultivate loyalty without dependency, and to maintain a delicate balance between secrecy and openness. This skill would later allow him to build an organization that was resilient and sophisticated, capable of operating across multiple cities and even international borders. Even at this early stage, the seeds of the empire that would one day dominate the global cocaine trade were being planted, nurtured by patience, observation, and strategic foresight. The city itself seemed to acknowledge the quiet rise of these young men. Cali was full of contrasts. The vibrant marketplaces and crowded streets coexisted with shadowy alleys and unseen networks of influence. While other young men might have been distracted by the noise, Gilberto moved with deliberation, noticing patterns that others overlooked. He understood that power was rarely gained through force alone, it required timing, discretion, and the ability to anticipate the moves of others before they were made. Each small success, each quietly orchestrated deal, built his confidence and expanded his understanding of the hidden structures that governed human behavior. Even as their enterprises grew, the brothers maintained a low profile. They avoided unnecessary confrontation, cultivated relationships across social and economic strata, and continued to operate in the quiet spaces where observation and patience were paramount. It was a slow, deliberate ascent, one built on intellect rather than intimidation, on foresight rather than impulse. Gilberto's early career, in its careful balance of opportunity and discretion, set the foundation for the much larger operations that would emerge in the decades to come. By the end of this period, Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela had transitioned from a young man learning the lessons of life in Cali to a burgeoning strategist ready to expand his influence. He had learned the value of observation, the power of patience, and the subtle art of human management. He had made his first moves on the board that would later span continents, understanding that success in the shadows often outlasts the fleeting glory of spectacle. The stage was set, the pieces were quietly in motion, and the young man who once stocked shelves and watched the streets was now beginning a journey that would lead to one of the most sophisticated and powerful criminal organizations the world had ever seen. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, the small, calculated ventures that Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela and his brother Miguel had begun in the streets of Cali had grown into something far more ambitious. Alongside trusted allies like José Santa Cruz Landano and Helmer Pacho Herrera, they were no longer merely young men testing the edges of opportunity, they were architects of an organization that would quietly come to dominate the cocaine trade. Unlike the loud, explosive tactics of other groups, the emerging Cali Cartel preferred subtlety, discretion, and a form of control that was both sophisticated and nearly invisible to outsiders. It was this preference for silence over spectacle that earned them the nickname Los Caballeros de Cali, the Gentlemen of Cali, a moniker that spoke not to politeness alone but to a style of crime that was strategic, calculated, and almost courteous in its execution. The birth of the cartel was less a sudden eruption and more a slow accumulation of influence, like a river swelling from small tributaries into a force that could shape landscapes. The early years were marked by careful planning, identifying supply routes, cultivating trustworthy contacts, and ensuring that every move reinforced the stability of the organization rather than exposing it to unnecessary risk. Each operation was meticulously designed to achieve multiple objectives: profit, influence, and the minimization of risk. Gilberto's mind, always several moves ahead, treated every shipment, every investment, and every alliance as part of a larger puzzle. The goal was not chaos but order, a system that could withstand the pressures of law enforcement, rival organizations, and the unpredictable forces of the market. Cali itself became a city quietly transformed by the cartel's influence. Pharmacies, banks, real estate holdings, and even media outlets were gradually brought under their sway, either through investment or discreet pressure. These legitimate businesses served dual purposes: they were a source of income and a cover for the less visible, more profitable aspects of their operations. From the outside, the Gentlemen of Cali appeared as savvy entrepreneurs, respectable figures navigating the rhythms of urban life. Yet beneath the surface, they orchestrated a network of supply chains, smuggling routes, and financial systems that spanned continents. Their approach was almost surgical, precise, measured, and remarkably resilient. A key factor in the cartel's early development was their preference for intelligence over intimidation. Whereas rivals often relied on violence to establish dominance, Gilberto and his associates focused on information. They invested in understanding their competitors, the patterns of law enforcement, and the vulnerabilities within political and financial systems. Every bribe, every discreet conversation, every quiet investment was a move designed to secure their position without drawing unwanted attention. Theirs was a form of power that was subtle but profound, capable of influencing outcomes far beyond the immediate reach of the organization's operatives. The early successes of the cartel were marked by their ability to expand cocaine operations without attracting the same public scrutiny that plagued other groups. Shipments flowed quietly through ports, hidden among legitimate goods. International contacts were carefully vetted, with loyalty and discretion valued above all else. The empire was growing, but it was growing like a shadow across the landscape, visible only to those who knew where, and how, to look. This was the genius of Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela, a man who understood that true power was often exercised not in the spotlight, but in the quiet moments where decisions went unseen, and outcomes were quietly secured. During these formative years, Gilberto also began to refine the internal structure of the cartel. Hierarchies were established, responsibilities clearly delineated, and communication channels carefully controlled. Trust was the currency of the organization, and it was earned through demonstrated competence, discretion, and loyalty. By cultivating this environment, Gilberto ensured that the cartel could operate with efficiency and minimal exposure, while also creating a sense of stability that allowed the enterprise to scale. This internal discipline would later prove crucial, enabling the organization to survive the tumultuous years that followed the rise and fall of their flamboyant rivals in Medellin. The Gentlemen of Cali were also pioneers in managing public perception. Unlike other organizations that courted infamy through headlines of violence and terror, the Cali Cartel cultivated an image of legitimacy and respectability. They wore suits, invested in community projects, and maintained a veneer of normalcy that allowed them to operate largely undisturbed for years. The contrast between the quiet, orderly exterior and the sprawling criminal operations beneath was deliberate. Gilberto understood that perception was as powerful as reality, and he used this insight to protect the organization while expanding its reach. The combination of intelligence, patience, and strategic foresight allowed the cartel to position itself for dominance. Whereas other organizations might be undone by their reliance on fear or the spectacle of violence, the Cali Cartel's measured approach created resilience. Each decision, each investment, each calculated risk reinforced the organization's stability. The birth of the cartel was therefore not marked by chaos or headline-grabbing violence, but by the quiet accumulation of power, influence, and control, all orchestrated by a man who thought of life as a series of moves on a vast, intricate board. As the empire quietly took shape, it became clear that the future of drug trafficking in Colombia, and beyond, would not be dominated by those who shouted the loudest, but by those who moved the most deliberately. Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela had created more than a criminal enterprise, he had established a new model of power, one that emphasized strategy over impulse, foresight over reaction, and patience over aggression. The gentlemen of Cali were, in every sense, a reflection of their leader, intelligent, calm, calculated, and always several steps ahead of the game. And so, as night settles once more over the city, the streets of Cali appear peaceful, ordinary, and silent. Yet beneath that calm, the wheels of an empire are turning, quietly, invisibly, inexorably. Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela, the chess player, continues to make his moves, setting the stage for a rise that will reshape the landscape of power, commerce, and crime in ways few could have imagined. The story is only beginning, but the pieces are already in motion, and the world is about to witness the subtle, yet unstoppable, rise of a criminal genius. It was during the 1980s, as the Cali Cartel quietly expanded its influence across Colombia and beyond, that Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela's strategic mind truly came to define the organization. He earned the nickname El Ajedrecista, the chess player, not because he relied on brute force or intimidation, but because he treated every challenge, every opportunity, as a move on an intricate board. Each decision was deliberate, calculated, and layered with foresight. Unlike many of his contemporaries, who relied on fear and spectacle to maintain control, Gilberto understood that intelligence, patience, and subtlety could create a far more durable form of power. To imagine his approach, picture a quiet room late at night, a wooden chessboard in the soft glow of a single lamp. Each piece represents a part of his world. The pawns are shipments moving quietly along clandestine routes, the bishops are trusted operatives overseeing operations in distant cities, the rooks are his financial holdings and front companies, and the queen, the most versatile piece, is his own ability to adapt, manipulate, and anticipate every possible countermove. Gilberto spent his days and nights not merely reacting to circumstances, but envisioning outcomes several steps ahead. This mindset became the foundation of the cartel's resilience, enabling it to expand globally while avoiding the chaos that often consumed rival organizations. Unlike the Medellin cartel, which sought fame through violence and high-profile attacks, the Cali cartel operated like a careful game of strategy. Gilberto emphasized discretion in every operation. Shipments were meticulously planned, bribes delivered quietly, and alliances carefully cultivated. Every interaction was measured, every risk calculated. To outsiders, the organization might have seemed almost invisible, but beneath that calm exterior was a sophisticated network capable of orchestrating international operations with remarkable efficiency. It was this capacity for quiet control that earned the cartel a reputation for being not only powerful but also dangerously intelligent. Gilberto's strategic approach extended beyond logistics into the realm of finance and influence. He understood that true power was not measured solely by control over territory or shipments, but by the ability to manipulate systems, people, and perception. Banks, pharmacies, and media outlets were not merely investments, they were tools, strategically positioned to launder money, gain access to information, and extend influence over the political and economic landscape. He viewed each asset as a piece on the board, to be moved thoughtfully in response to both immediate needs and long-term objectives. In this way, the organization's empire grew not with chaos, but with deliberate, almost surgical precision. Part of what made Gilberto's strategy so effective was his emphasis on human psychology. He understood that loyalty was earned through respect and careful management, rather than fear alone. Operatives, associates, and even rivals were often treated with a subtle blend of persuasion, incentives, and calculated leniency. By cultivating a sense of order and predictability, he reduced the likelihood of betrayal and ensured that his directives were followed with minimal friction. This approach, gentle in appearance but ruthless in logic, allowed the cartel to expand while avoiding the internal instability that frequently plagued other criminal organizations. Information, in Gilberto's mind, was a form of currency as valuable as any shipment or sum of money. He invested in networks that monitored competitors, tracked law enforcement activity, and identified vulnerabilities in both allies and adversaries. Every decision was informed by intelligence, and every move accounted for contingencies. In essence, he played multiple games simultaneously: the game of commerce, the game of loyalty, the game of perception, and the game of survival. This multi-layered strategy made the cartel not only successful, but extraordinarily difficult to dismantle. Even at the highest levels of the organization, Gilberto maintained a calm, composed demeanor. He rarely acted impulsively; instead, he listened, observed, and measured before making a decision. This patience, almost meditative in nature, allowed him to navigate crises that might have unraveled a lesser mind. When rivals threatened territory or when law enforcement intensified surveillance, he responded not with panic, but with calculated adjustments. Every choice was a premeditated move, designed to protect the organization while maintaining the illusion of normalcy. In this way, the empire expanded almost imperceptibly, slipping past the attention of authorities and rivals alike. The chess player's philosophy was evident not only in operational decisions, but in his long-term vision. Unlike other criminal leaders who chased immediate gains, Gilberto thought in terms of decades. Each investment, alliance, and strategy was designed to secure the cartel's dominance well into the future. He considered every possible scenario, from law enforcement crackdowns to the rise of rival groups, and positioned the organization to weather these challenges. This forward-thinking mindset, paired with meticulous attention to detail, created a structure that was both flexible and resilient, capable of adapting to changing circumstances without losing cohesion. It was also during this period that the contrast between Gilberto and his rivals became most apparent. While Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel embraced violence, chaos, and notoriety, Gilberto's operations remained quiet, orderly, and precise. Where others saw danger in confrontation, he saw opportunity in subtlety. Where others sought immediate results, he sought sustainable dominance. And where others relied on intimidation, he relied on strategy. This distinction became a defining feature of the Cali Cartel and solidified Gilberto's reputation as a mind that was as brilliant as it was disciplined. By the end of this period, Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela had not only solidified his role as a leader of the Cali Cartel but had also established a blueprint for modern criminal strategy. His approach combined intelligence, patience, and psychological insight with an almost philosophical understanding of risk and control. The chess player did not rely on spectacle; he relied on foresight, subtlety, and the careful orchestration of complex systems. In doing so, he created an organization that would come to dominate international cocaine trafficking, not through fear alone, but through the quiet power of calculated mastery. As night falls once more over the city of Cali, one can imagine Gilberto in a dimly lit room, the soft hum of the city in the distance, studying reports, evaluating shipments, and considering the next moves on his intricate chessboard. His mind, always active, processes possibilities and contingencies, while his calm exterior belies the complexity of his strategies. It is in these quiet, contemplative hours that the essence of the chess player becomes apparent, a man whose intellect, patience, and vision would guide an empire in shadows, shaping a story of power that is as fascinating as it is cautionary. As the 1980s progressed, the reach of Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela and the Cali Cartel extended far beyond the familiar streets and neighborhoods of Cali. What had begun as careful, localized operations gradually transformed into a sophisticated international network, moving enormous quantities of cocaine across borders while maintaining a veneer of normalcy that concealed the empire's true scale. Unlike the flamboyant methods of other criminal organizations, the cartel relied on discretion, strategy, and a meticulous attention to detail. Every shipment, every partnership, and every financial maneuver was orchestrated as though part of a carefully choreographed ballet, silent, precise, and devastatingly effective. The expansion of the cartel was not sudden, it was the result of years of planning and observation, a natural progression for a group that viewed crime as a business and strategy as an art. Gilberto understood that growth required more than just moving product, it required the creation of reliable infrastructure, secure channels, and a network of trusted operatives capable of executing his vision. He invested in contacts across the Americas and Europe, carefully selecting individuals who could be relied upon to maintain discretion and loyalty. Every alliance was measured, every arrangement calculated, with the understanding that a single misstep could unravel years of careful preparation. One of the most remarkable aspects of the cartel's expansion was its ability to operate under the radar. While other organizations attracted attention through violence, ostentation, or public spectacle, Gilberto's operations remained quietly effective. Shipments were concealed among legitimate cargo, using innovative methods that minimized risk of interception. Financial transactions were routed through layers of legitimate businesses, allowing immense profits to move unseen. And through it all, the city of Cali appeared largely unchanged, a seemingly ordinary urban landscape concealing one of the most sophisticated criminal enterprises the world had ever seen. Gilberto's vision was global, long before the cartel's notoriety reached international headlines. He recognized that success depended not only on the scale of operations but also on control over markets, supply chains, and information. By understanding the logistics of transportation, the psychology of buyers, and the vulnerabilities of competitors, he was able to anticipate changes in demand and adapt accordingly. Each shipment, each negotiation, each financial move was a step toward consolidating power on a scale that few could comprehend. The chess player was expanding his board, positioning pieces in distant cities and across continents, always thinking several moves ahead. The expansion also required careful management of risk. The international drug trade was fraught with danger, from law enforcement crackdowns to rival cartels, from unpredictable shipments to treacherous partners. Gilberto mitigated these risks through meticulous planning, strategic alliances, and the cultivation of loyalty. He understood that the smallest breach of trust or the slightest miscalculation could have catastrophic consequences. Therefore, every decision was guided by foresight and precision, a philosophy that enabled the cartel to thrive where others faltered. During this period, the Cali Cartel's influence began to permeate areas beyond direct trafficking. Politicians, law enforcement officials, and business leaders became subtly entangled in the web of operations, often unknowingly. Through bribes, favors, and carefully cultivated relationships, Gilberto ensured that potential obstacles could be managed before they became threats. These efforts were executed with discretion, maintaining the appearance of legitimacy while quietly consolidating power. In this way, the cartel's reach extended not only geographically but also into spheres of influence that reinforced its resilience. Expansion also brought with it a heightened need for internal cohesion. The organization was no longer a small, tightly knit group operating in familiar streets, it had become a sprawling network requiring coordination, discipline, and communication. Gilberto relied on his calm, measured leadership to maintain order, delegating responsibilities while ensuring accountability. Operatives were carefully selected and trained, alliances constantly evaluated, and processes refined to ensure efficiency and security. By creating a structure that emphasized both loyalty and competence, he ensured that the cartel could function effectively even as it grew to a global scale. One of the quieter, yet most significant aspects of expansion was the emphasis on sustainability. Unlike other groups that sought immediate gains through high-risk strategies, Gilberto prioritized steady growth and long-term stability. Shipments were calculated not only for profit but for continuity, alliances for reliability rather than spectacle. This patient approach allowed the Cali Cartel to avoid many of the pitfalls that destroyed rivals, creating a system that was resilient in the face of both law enforcement pressure and the unpredictability of global markets. The result of this careful expansion was a criminal enterprise unlike any other. The Cali Cartel moved vast quantities of cocaine with efficiency and discretion, managing finances and influence with the precision of a corporation. At the same time, the organization remained almost invisible to the public eye, a ghostly presence whose power was felt more in patterns, influence, and outcomes than in direct confrontation. Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela, the chess player, had created a system where strategy, foresight, and patience outweighed brute force, and where power could be exercised with quiet, terrifying effectiveness. As night falls over the sprawling city of Cali, one can imagine Gilberto reviewing reports, considering shipments, evaluating partners, and plotting the next steps in a game whose stakes were immense. The city itself appears tranquil, almost ordinary, yet beneath that calm exterior flows an empire of immense complexity and reach. The chess player is always several moves ahead, his mind calculating outcomes, contingencies, and opportunities. Expansion is not merely about territory or profit, it is about foresight, control, and the creation of a system that can endure. This period of growth marked a turning point in the story of the Cali Cartel. It was no longer a local or regional power, it was an international force, quietly shaping the drug trade on multiple continents. And at the center of this empire, orchestrating every move with deliberate precision, stood Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela. The chess player's vision had transformed from a local ambition into a global strategy, a testament to the power of intellect, patience, and careful orchestration. The empire was in motion, its influence spreading silently but inexorably, and the world was only beginning to understand the scope of the man who controlled it. Even as the Cali Cartel quietly extended its influence across continents, the world around it was far from calm. Rivalries, both old and emerging, constantly tested the organization's strength and strategy. Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela, ever the chess player, understood that power was not a static possession but a dynamic balance, one that could be disrupted by rivals, law enforcement, or even a single miscalculation. Navigating this dangerous landscape required patience, foresight, and the ability to respond without revealing vulnerability, a skill he had honed since his youth in the streets and pharmacies of Cali. The most immediate threats came from the Medellin cartel, led by Pablo Escobar, whose approach was diametrically opposed to Gilberto's. Escobar relied on terror, audacity, and public spectacle. He embraced violence as a tool of influence, using bombings, assassinations, and high-profile kidnappings to intimidate rivals and manipulate governments. Gilberto observed from a distance, noting the costs as well as the effects of such tactics. He recognized that while fear could provide short-term dominance, it was also volatile, attracting attention and provoking retaliation. The chess player's response was not confrontation but calculation, avoiding direct clashes while gradually strengthening his own position through strategy and discretion. The rivalry between the cartels was more than a competition for shipments or markets, it was a clash of philosophy. Medellin was flamboyant, chaotic, and dangerous. Cali, under Gilberto's direction, was methodical, disciplined, and resilient. Each conflict, whether over routes, contacts, or political influence, became a move on an intricate board. Gilberto anticipated his rivals' responses, calculated the risks, and positioned his organization to benefit even from their aggression. In this way, what could have been a dangerous feud instead became an exercise in strategic patience, demonstrating the subtle genius of his leadership. Yet, rivalries were not limited to Medellin. Even within Cali, competition existed. Other groups and ambitious individuals sought to carve their own spheres of influence, testing the boundaries of the cartel's control. In response, Gilberto relied on alliances, diplomacy, and, when necessary, discreet displays of power. Loyalty was cultivated through careful selection, negotiation, and the subtle reinforcement of trust. He understood that internal stability was as crucial as external dominance, without it, expansion and influence could crumble. Each challenge, whether external or internal, was approached like a chess problem, every piece considered, every potential response anticipated, every contingency accounted for. In addition to rivals, law enforcement and government agencies posed constant, unpredictable challenges. Investigations, raids, and international pressure were always potential threats to the organization. Gilberto's strategy was again rooted in patience and foresight. He understood that confrontation with authorities could be catastrophic, so he built layers of protection, shell companies, discreet financial channels, and carefully vetted operatives who could manage sensitive operations. By minimizing exposure and maintaining the appearance of legitimacy, the cartel could continue to operate even under scrutiny, quietly adapting to shifting enforcement pressures. One of the most remarkable aspects of this period was Gilberto's ability to turn challenges into opportunities. When rivals acted aggressively or law enforcement investigated, he used the moment to assess weaknesses, redirect resources, and refine strategy. Every crisis was an opportunity to strengthen the organization, to anticipate future threats, and to teach operatives the value of calm, calculated response. It was a lesson in resilience, demonstrating that power was not only about accumulation but also about the careful management of uncertainty. The subtleties of human behavior became increasingly central to navigating this dangerous world. Gilberto relied on observation, psychology, and negotiation to prevent conflicts from escalating. He cultivated relationships with politicians, businessmen, and law enforcement officials, often using persuasion rather than coercion. By understanding the motivations, fears, and desires of others, he could influence outcomes without overt displays of force. This approach allowed the cartel to expand and maintain dominance while avoiding the headline-grabbing chaos that characterized rivals like Medellin. Despite the ever-present dangers, Gilberto maintained a calm, composed presence within the organization. His operatives, allies, and even rivals recognized that his mind was always several steps ahead. Decisions were made deliberately, contingencies considered, and potential risks minimized. The ability to remain unflappable in the face of threats became a hallmark of his leadership, inspiring confidence among allies and caution among competitors. In this way, even the presence of danger reinforced the cartel's cohesion and effectiveness. The chess player's approach to rivalries and challenges extended beyond immediate threats. He considered long-term outcomes, envisioning how conflicts might reshape markets, alliances, and political influence years down the line. Every interaction, every negotiation, every calculated risk was a step toward ensuring the organization's survival and dominance over time. Unlike impulsive rivals, who often sought instant victories, Gilberto's strategy was patient, resilient, and enduring. As night falls softly over the city of Cali, the streets appear calm, but beneath the surface, a network of careful, deliberate operations continues. Gilberto reviews reports, anticipates potential moves by rivals, and adjusts the organization's position with quiet precision. Each decision is a calculated response, a move designed to protect the empire, strengthen loyalty, and expand influence without exposing unnecessary risk. It is in these moments that the true nature of his genius becomes apparent, a man who thrives not through chaos or aggression, but through observation, calculation, and a patient orchestration of complex systems. This period of rivalries and challenges underscores the duality of power, the contrast between threat and control, chaos and calm, aggression and strategy. Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela's ability to navigate this landscape with intelligence, patience, and foresight not only solidified the cartel's dominance but also established him as one of the most formidable criminal minds of his era. In the quiet hours, as the city sleeps, one can imagine him contemplating the board, moving pieces invisibly, and ensuring that even the most unpredictable forces are accounted for. The game is never-ending, and the chess player remains always several moves ahead. Power, Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela understood, was only as strong as the foundation upon which it rested. By the mid-1980s, the Cali Cartel had grown into a sprawling network of operations spanning continents, but with expansion came the crucial challenge of maintaining control. Gilberto's genius lay not only in orchestrating shipments, laundering money, and cultivating alliances, but in his ability to impose discipline, nurture loyalty, and create a culture that reinforced order over chaos. In his mind, a well-structured organization was like a carefully arranged garden, each part needed attention, balance, and cultivation to thrive. The first principle of maintaining control was loyalty. Gilberto knew that trust could not be assumed, it had to be earned and continually reinforced. He cultivated a hierarchy based on merit, discretion, and reliability. Operatives who demonstrated competence and commitment were rewarded, while those who faltered or showed signs of betrayal were quietly removed. There was a rhythm to this process, subtle yet unmistakable. Loyalty was nurtured like a delicate plant, with incentives carefully applied, guidance offered when needed, and consequences delivered with quiet precision. By creating an environment where allegiance was both respected and necessary, Gilberto ensured that the cartel's internal structure remained resilient, even as its operations expanded globally. Discipline, closely intertwined with loyalty, was another cornerstone of the organization. Every member, from couriers to accountants to senior lieutenants, operated within clearly defined parameters. Instructions were precise, responsibilities explicit, and accountability unavoidable. Mistakes were costly, not merely for the individual but for the network as a whole. Yet Gilberto rarely resorted to displays of violence within the organization. Instead, he relied on measured consequences, careful reassignment, or removal from sensitive roles. His calm, deliberate approach reinforced a culture of professionalism, creating an organization that functioned with the efficiency of a corporation rather than the unpredictability of a gang. Central to maintaining control was also the management of information. Gilberto recognized that knowledge was power, and that controlling who knew what, and when, was critical to stability. Communication channels were tightly regulated, sensitive operations compartmentalized, and critical decisions reserved for the leadership circle. This structure not only minimized risk but also ensured that loyalty and discretion were rewarded. Operatives understood that information was a privilege, earned through trust and reliability, and this understanding became an unspoken rule that reinforced order throughout the cartel. Another subtle, yet powerful, tool for maintaining control was psychological insight. Gilberto had a remarkable ability to read people, anticipate their desires, and subtly influence behavior. He understood that fear alone was insufficient, it created resentment and instability. Instead, he used a combination of incentives, persuasion, and calculated pressure to guide decisions and reinforce desired behaviors. Whether cultivating loyalty among lieutenants or negotiating with external partners, he relied on observation, timing, and a nuanced understanding of human motivation. This approach allowed the cartel to operate with minimal internal friction, and it fostered a sense of respect rather than mere obedience. The internal cohesion of the organization was further strengthened through routine, ritual, and structure. Meetings, reporting processes, and operational reviews were conducted with consistency and precision. These moments, though seemingly ordinary, served to reinforce hierarchy, instill accountability, and provide opportunities for mentorship and strategic planning. The consistency of these practices created a rhythm within the organization, a cadence that made operations predictable, manageable, and efficient. Through discipline, repetition, and careful oversight, the cartel functioned as a single, coordinated organism, capable of executing complex international operations with remarkable reliability. Gilberto's leadership also emphasized the importance of ethical boundaries within the organization, not morality in a conventional sense, but a code of conduct that balanced operational efficiency with sustainability. Decisions were guided by strategy rather than impulse, and actions were measured against long-term objectives rather than short-term gain. This approach minimized unnecessary risk, prevented internal chaos, and allowed the cartel to expand without attracting undue attention from rivals or authorities. In essence, the organization's internal rules became a reflection of Gilberto's own strategic philosophy: calm, deliberate, and always forward-thinking. Even in moments of external pressure, whether rival confrontations, law enforcement investigations, or market fluctuations, Gilberto's emphasis on control, discipline, and loyalty allowed the cartel to remain steady. He did not react with panic or aggression, he adapted quietly, recalibrating operations, reinforcing internal cohesion, and positioning the organization to weather challenges. This calm resilience, paired with a clear command structure and a culture of accountability, made the Cali Cartel remarkably durable, able to absorb shocks that might have destabilized lesser organizations. The chess players' approach to leadership also relied on selective empowerment. Key operatives were entrusted with responsibilities, but always under careful supervision and within a framework that limited exposure and risk. Delegation was not haphazard, it was calculated, allowing the organization to scale while maintaining control. By empowering individuals while safeguarding the integrity of the network, Gilberto ensured that the cartel could grow without sacrificing stability or oversight. As night settles softly over the city, one can imagine Gilberto sitting quietly in his office, reviewing reports, considering the loyalty and performance of his operatives, and refining strategies for maintaining control. The streets of Cali appear peaceful, the city asleep, yet the mind of the chess player remains active, orchestrating a network that spans oceans, borders, and layers of influence. Through discipline, loyalty, structure, and subtle psychological insight, he has created an empire that moves with precision, efficiency, and quiet authority. In this way, the Cali Cartel became more than a criminal organization, it became a testament to the power of strategic leadership. The careful cultivation of discipline, loyalty, and internal order ensured that operations could expand while risk was minimized, and that the organization could endure challenges that might have destroyed less thoughtfully constructed enterprises. Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela's genius lay not in violence or spectacle, but in his ability to manage complexity, anticipate threats, and maintain cohesion through calm, calculated leadership. As the night deepens, the city's lights glimmer softly against the darkness, and the chess player continues his silent work. Every operative, every shipment, every decision moves as part of a carefully constructed system, a system held together by loyalty, reinforced by discipline, and guided by the quiet intelligence of a man who sees several steps ahead. This mastery of control, both internal and external, would become one of the defining features of the Cali Cartel, setting it apart from rivals and ensuring that Gilberto's empire could endure in a world defined by chaos, competition, and uncertainty. By the late 1980s, the Cali Cartel had evolved into an empire not only of operations but of wealth and influence, and at the center of this quiet dominion was Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela. Unlike the brash spectacle of other organizations, the power of the Cali Cartel was measured not in headlines or public terror, but in the subtle control of systems, people, and money. Every business, every shipment, every alliance was a calculated move on a global chessboard, reflecting the intelligence, patience, and foresight that had defined Gilberto's rise from the streets of Cali. The cartel's wealth was vast, almost unimaginable in scale. Profits flowed in quietly, routed through layers of legitimate enterprises and shell companies that obscured the true scope of operations. Banks, pharmacies, real estate ventures, and export-import businesses became the silent arteries through which enormous sums were moved, invested, and laundered. To the outside world, the organization appeared as a network of respectable businessmen and entrepreneurs. Beneath this facade, however, each financial transaction, each property acquisition, and each corporate partnership was a carefully considered piece of a larger, meticulously orchestrated system. Gilberto's approach to wealth was, like his approach to power, strategic and deliberate. Money was not only a tool for luxury or indulgence, it was a form of influence, a way to extend control over politics, business, and society. Bribes were carefully calibrated, favors carefully delivered, and investments carefully targeted. Politicians, law enforcement officials, and business leaders could be swayed not through force but through persuasion, subtle incentives, and strategic generosity. In this way, the cartel's financial empire became a web of influence, quietly bending systems in favor of its operations while remaining largely invisible to public scrutiny. The influence of the cartel extended beyond economics into social and political realms. Philanthropy, business investments, and public gestures of generosity created an image of legitimacy, painting the organization as a respected presence within the city and region. Schools, hospitals, and community projects were quietly supported, reinforcing loyalty among local populations and providing a buffer against criticism. This careful cultivation of reputation allowed the cartel to operate without attracting the same scrutiny faced by more flamboyant rivals. For Gilberto, perception was as critical as reality, shaping the way others viewed the organization ensured stability, minimized resistance, and provided a measure of protection from interference. Internationally, the reach of the cartel's wealth and influence was even more pronounced. Shipments of cocaine moved through clandestine networks spanning the Americas and Europe, coordinated with precision and intelligence. Financial channels crossed borders, integrating into legitimate economies in ways that made tracking nearly impossible. Alliances with foreign partners were cultivated with the same discretion and strategic foresight that defined every aspect of the organization. In all of this, Gilberto maintained a steady hand, ensuring that expansion was controlled, profitable, and sustainable. Even within the organization, the management of wealth was careful and deliberate. Rewards were tied to performance, loyalty was incentivized, and responsibilities were distributed to maintain accountability and efficiency. Money became a tool not just for operational expansion but for reinforcing internal cohesion, ensuring that operatives remained motivated and aligned with the cartel's long-term vision. In this way, the empire of wealth became an extension of the chess player's strategic philosophy, every move deliberate, every resource optimized, every relationship managed with foresight. Despite the immense scale of operations and profits, Gilberto himself remained remarkably calm and disciplined. Extravagance was measured, luxury discreet. The focus was never on ostentation but on sustainability, influence, and security. Like a master chess player, he understood that even small errors in judgment could have far-reaching consequences. Every financial decision, every investment, and every alliance was weighed against potential risks and rewards, ensuring that the cartel's empire remained robust even in the face of unforeseen challenges. The hidden empire of the Cali Cartel, therefore, was as much a product of strategy as of wealth. It was a system in which every asset, every transaction, and every relationship was a calculated part of a larger whole. By quietly consolidating influence across economic, social, and political spheres, Gilberto created a network that was extraordinarily difficult to disrupt. Unlike rivals who relied on violence and intimidation, the cartel's power was exercised subtly, efficiently, and almost invisibly, yet it was no less formidable. This period of wealth and influence also highlighted the contrast between appearance and reality. From the outside, Cali remained a city of ordinary life. Markets, streets, and neighborhoods continued their quiet rhythms. Few could see the web of power stretching beneath the surface, controlled by a man whose genius lay in patience, calculation, and foresight. The chess player had transformed from a boy observing the streets of Mariquita into a master orchestrator of a global empire, his influence extending into areas of society that most people would never imagine. As night falls over Cali once again, the city appears serene, bathed in soft lights and quiet streets. Yet beneath that calm surface flows a network of wealth, influence, and strategy that touches lives, markets, and governments across continents. Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela sits quietly at the center of this hidden empire, contemplating the next move, ensuring stability, and quietly extending his influence. Wealth, in his hands, is not merely money, it is control, power, and the very means by which the cartel's legacy is constructed. In the end, it is this hidden empire, the careful orchestration of wealth, influence, and strategic foresight, that defines the essence of Gilberto's genius. Through patience, calculation, and subtlety, he built not just a criminal organization, but a resilient, sophisticated system capable of navigating a world defined by risk, competition, and uncertainty. The chess player had transformed the concept of criminal power itself, demonstrating that the quiet accumulation of resources, influence, and intelligence could be far more formidable than the spectacle of violence or fear. While the Cali Cartel's influence and wealth continued to grow, Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela maintained a carefully curated lifestyle that mirrored the quiet, calculated nature of his empire. Unlike the flamboyant excesses displayed by rivals, his approach to luxury was deliberate and discreet, a reflection of both personal temperament and strategic thinking. Wealth was never flaunted for spectacle, it was a tool, a shield, and a subtle assertion of power that could be exercised without drawing unwanted attention. For Gilberto, the art of living well was inseparable from the art of maintaining control. His residences, scattered across Colombia and abroad, were elegant but understated. Villas and estates were chosen not for ostentation, but for security, privacy, and functionality. Each property was carefully monitored, designed to provide comfort while minimizing exposure to external threats. From the quiet gardens to the tastefully furnished interiors, the spaces reflected a philosophy of controlled indulgence, enjoying life's pleasures while never compromising vigilance or operational oversight. Even the smallest details, lighting, landscaping, the arrangement of rooms, were considered for both aesthetic pleasure and strategic advantage, ensuring that the environment supported both relaxation and careful planning. Transportation, too, was approached with the same philosophy. Vehicles were selected for reliability, discretion, and safety, not for flashiness. Air travel, when necessary, relied on trusted contacts and secure arrangements, ensuring that movement between cities or countries remained virtually undetectable. In every aspect of mobility, Gilberto demonstrated the same quiet efficiency that characterized his business operations. The chess player understood that appearing ordinary often provided the best cover for extraordinary influence. While rivals sought attention through extravagant parties, public displays, or ostentatious collections, Gilberto preferred the company of a small circle of trusted associates, family, and close advisors. Social gatherings were controlled, private, and carefully curated, providing both relaxation and opportunities to observe allies, assess loyalty, and reinforce relationships. Conversations were measured, humor subtle, and insights quietly exchanged. In this way, lifestyle became not only a personal refuge but a strategic instrument, strengthening bonds, conveying status, and reinforcing the internal cohesion of the cartel. The careful management of luxury extended to investments and financial planning. Gilberto's holdings included legitimate businesses, real estate, and international ventures, all selected for profitability, stability, and influence. The wealth he amassed was reinvested strategically, both to generate returns and to solidify his position within legal and social structures. Luxury, in this sense, was inseparable from strategy. It reinforced respect, created opportunities, and maintained a degree of invisibility, allowing the cartel to operate with minimal interference. Even personal habits reflected this balance between indulgence and prudence. Gilberto was known for a disciplined lifestyle, combining careful attention to health, exercise, and daily routines with the pleasures he allowed himself in moderation. Meals, clothing, and personal interactions were all curated, blending comfort with strategic subtlety. This balance reinforced the image of calm authority and measured sophistication that permeated both his personal and professional life. It was a lifestyle designed not for admiration, but for effectiveness, a demonstration that control, patience, and quiet power could be as compelling as spectacle. Art, culture, and intellectual pursuits also formed part of this measured lifestyle. Gilberto surrounded himself with literature, music, and thoughtful conversation, cultivating a personal world that reflected both refinement and strategic thinking. These pursuits were more than indulgences, they were a means of sharpening the mind, fostering contemplation, and providing an inner discipline that complemented the challenges of managing a global criminal enterprise. The chess player's approach to life was as meticulous as his approach to operations, each moment, each choice, each environment carefully curated to enhance insight, control, and effectiveness. Yet, even within this calm, controlled existence, there were reminders of the dangers inherent in his position. Security measures were constant, trusted guards, secure communications, and contingency planning were part of everyday life. Gilberto understood that even the smallest lapse in vigilance could jeopardize decades of carefully orchestrated strategy. Luxury and safety were intertwined, and his life became a continuous exercise in balancing comfort, discretion, and operational security. The contrast between the quiet elegance of his lifestyle and the vast, unseen criminal empire he controlled created a sense of subtle power. While the city outside remained unaware of the scale of operations unfolding in hidden offices, warehouses, and financial institutions, Gilberto's calm, controlled presence exuded authority. The chess player had mastered the art of blending into normalcy while orchestrating extraordinary influence, a skill that allowed him to extend power far beyond the reach of rivals or authorities. As night falls softly over the Colombian landscape, one can imagine Gilberto walking through the gardens of his estate, reflecting on the empire he has built, the strategy that guides every decision, and the careful balance that allows him to enjoy life without compromising control. The soft glow of lights, the tranquility of well-tended spaces, and the quiet hum of distant city activity create an environment that mirrors the essence of the man himself, calm, deliberate, measured, and profoundly strategic. Through this quiet lifestyle, Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela demonstrated that true power does not require ostentation. It is exercised through patience, discretion, and thoughtful orchestration, qualities that defined both the man and the empire he built. Luxury, in his hands, was more than comfort, it was a tool, a shield, and a reflection of the enduring intelligence and foresight that made the Cali Cartel one of the most sophisticated criminal organizations in history. Despite the careful discretion, meticulous planning, and quiet sophistication of the Cali Cartel, law enforcement could not remain oblivious forever. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, both Colombian authorities and international agencies had begun to take notice of the subtle yet expansive empire that Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela had quietly built. Unlike the Medellin cartel, whose violent displays drew immediate and overwhelming attention, the Cali cartel's operations had long flown beneath the radar. But intelligence, persistence, and an increasing awareness of the organization's global reach gradually brought investigators closer, introducing a quiet, persistent tension into Gilberto's otherwise controlled world. Gilberto understood that pressure from authorities could be as dangerous as rival attacks. Even the most sophisticated organization is vulnerable to exposure, and law enforcement had the potential to unravel years of meticulous planning with a single discovery. Therefore, he approached this threat as he did all others, strategically, patiently, and with foresight. Every action, every communication, and every shipment was reviewed for security. Layers of protection, both operational and financial, were continually reinforced. It was not paranoia but pragmatism, a recognition that vigilance was essential to survival. The cartel's response to law enforcement pressure relied heavily on intelligence gathering and information management. Operatives were trained to identify potential vulnerabilities, report suspicious activity, and maintain strict operational security. Communication networks were compartmentalized, sensitive decisions reserved for trusted leadership, and contingency plans prepared for every plausible scenario. Gilberto's ability to anticipate investigative strategies, predict law enforcement moves, and adjust operations accordingly became a cornerstone of the cartels. Enduring resilience. In effect, the chess player was always several steps ahead of those who sought to dismantle his empire. One of the most remarkable aspects of this period was the subtle balance Gilberto maintained between visibility and invisibility. While authorities were increasingly aware that the Cali cartel existed, the organization remained difficult to target directly. Shipments were structured to avoid detection, financial movements obscured through layers of legitimate businesses, and alliances with influential individuals minimized interference. The cartel's sophistication allowed it to operate effectively under growing scrutiny, turning law enforcement pressure into a challenge to be managed rather than a threat to provoke panic. At the same time, the psychological tension within the organization increased. Operatives were acutely aware of the growing scrutiny, and whispers of investigation could create uncertainty or anxiety. Gilberto's calm, deliberate leadership was crucial in maintaining morale and focus. By reinforcing discipline, emphasizing loyalty, and providing clear instructions, he ensured that the organization remained coherent even as external pressures mounted. Trust in leadership became a stabilizing force, allowing the cartel to continue operations with minimal disruption despite the persistent threat of legal intervention. International law enforcement agencies, particularly the DEA, began coordinating with Colombian authorities to understand the full scope of the cartel's operations. Surveillance, wiretaps, and informants slowly chipped away at the layers of secrecy, creating a sense of quiet urgency. Gilberto responded with the same measured patience that had characterized his rise, re-evaluating supply routes, adjusting financial networks, and shoring up alliances. The chess player treated these developments not as crises to be feared, but as complex puzzles requiring careful attention and strategic adaptation. The contrast between the visible calm of Gilberto's lifestyle and the underlying tension of law enforcement pressure was striking. To the outside observer, he remained composed, measured, and seemingly untouchable. Behind the scenes, however, the cartel's leadership was acutely aware of the stakes. Every decision had to account for both operational efficiency and the possibility of detection. Meetings were conducted with discretion, security measures reinforced, and contingency plans continuously updated. This dual reality, calm exterior, vigilant interior, defined the organization's approach to surviving a world increasingly aware of its presence. Part of the strategy involved cultivating influence over key officials and institutions. Bribes, favors, and carefully constructed relationships with politicians, law enforcement, and business leaders created a protective buffer. While not immune to investigation, the cartel's subtle network of influence complicated enforcement efforts, buying time and space for operational adjustments. Gilberto understood that soft power, persuasion, strategic generosity, and manipulation of perception could be as effective as force in mitigating law enforcement pressure. This period also underscored the importance of foresight in Gilberto's leadership. He anticipated not only immediate risks but the long-term implications of investigations, media exposure, and international cooperation. Every shipment, investment, and alliance was evaluated for potential vulnerability. By thinking several moves ahead, he ensured that the organization could absorb shocks, adapt, and continue functioning effectively despite mounting scrutiny. In essence, the chess player was engaging in a delicate game, balancing visibility and secrecy, risk and reward, freedom and exposure. As night falls over Cali once more, the city appears serene, yet the calm masks a world of quiet calculation and vigilance. Gilberto sits in his office, reviewing intelligence reports, considering investigative patterns, and adjusting strategies to maintain operational continuity. The chess player does not react impulsively, he anticipates, calculates, and adapts, ensuring that the cartel continues to function under the subtle but growing pressure of law enforcement. In this way, the tension of scrutiny becomes part of the game, a challenge to be navigated with patience, intelligence, and calm authority. This era of increasing law enforcement pressure ultimately tested the limits of Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela's strategic brilliance. His ability to maintain composure, control, and resilience under the quiet threat of detection would prove critical in sustaining the cartel's operations. Through intelligence, foresight, and subtle influence, he demonstrated that true power is not only about wealth or violence, but about the capacity to anticipate threats, manage complexity, and preserve stability in a world that constantly shifts beneath one's feet. Even the most disciplined and meticulously organized empire is not immune to internal tension, and the Cali Cartel was no exception. As the organization expanded into an international powerhouse, the subtle cracks in loyalty, ambition, and human frailty began to appear. Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela, ever the chess player, understood that threats were not always external, sometimes the most dangerous challenges came from within. Managing these internal pressures required as much strategy, patience, and foresight as orchestrating international shipments or navigating law enforcement scrutiny. Internal tension often arose from ambition. As the cartel grew, so did the opportunities for power, influence, and wealth among operatives. Some individuals began to test boundaries, seeking greater autonomy or attempting to assert themselves within the hierarchy. These ambitions, if left unchecked, could disrupt the delicate balance of loyalty and discipline that Gilberto had so carefully cultivated. The chess player approached such situations with calculated subtlety, using observation, negotiation, and carefully applied consequences to maintain cohesion while preventing resentment or rebellion. Betrayals, though infrequent, were a constant concern. The stakes were immense, and even a single act of disloyalty could compromise operations and endanger lives. Gilberto's approach was preventative rather than reactive. Operatives were carefully vetted, relationships constantly monitored, and sensitive responsibilities assigned only to those whose loyalty had been proven over time. In the rare instances when a betrayal occurred, consequences were precise, deliberate, and often discreet, designed to restore order without drawing attention or creating panic. In this way, the cartel managed to navigate treacherous internal waters with remarkable stability. Conflict also emerged from differences in operational philosophy. Some within the organization favored speed, risk-taking, or aggressive expansion, while Gilberto prioritized patience, strategy, and subtlety. These differences occasionally created friction, as operatives struggled to reconcile short-term ambitions with the long-term vision of the leadership. Once again, Gilberto's calm and deliberate approach allowed him to mediate disputes, enforce discipline, and realign the organization's efforts without escalation. He understood that maintaining unity was as important as achieving operational success. Communication played a crucial role in managing internal tensions. Gilberto maintained clear channels, ensured expectations were understood, and created a culture where loyalty and discretion were both expected and rewarded. Meetings, reports, and operational briefings were conducted with a measured regularity, providing structure while allowing leadership to monitor performance, identify potential issues, and address grievances before they escalated. This careful balance of transparency and control reinforced loyalty while maintaining the integrity of the organization. Financial incentives were also used strategically to manage potential unrest. Rewards, promotions, and opportunities were tied to performance and loyalty, creating a system where ambition was channeled productively rather than destructively. By aligning personal gain with organizational success, Gilberto minimized the risk of internal discord and encouraged operatives to act in the best interest of the cartel. Money, in this context, became both a tool of motivation and a mechanism for maintaining cohesion. Even with these precautions, the human element could not be entirely controlled. Stress, fear, and the awareness of constant risk sometimes led to tension, misjudgments, or impulsive actions. Gilberto's leadership style, calm, observant, and strategic, provided a stabilizing influence. He anticipated the pressures his operatives faced, guided them through uncertainty, and maintained an environment where loyalty and trust were continually reinforced. The chess player understood that a well-functioning organization depended not only on strategy and resources, but on the careful management of human emotion and behavior. As the cartel's operations expanded globally, maintaining cohesion became increasingly complex. Different regions, teams, and functions had to operate semi-independently while adhering to central strategy and vision. Delegation, oversight, and monitoring became essential, and Gilberto invested considerable effort in cultivating leaders who shared his values, judgment, and understanding of strategy. By embedding the principles of patience, foresight, and loyalty throughout the organization, he created a network capable of functioning effectively even under pressure. The tension of internal dynamics also highlighted the duality of power, the necessity of balancing control with autonomy. Operatives needed enough freedom to execute tasks effectively, yet boundaries had to be clear enough to prevent overreach, ambition, or betrayal. Gilberto's ability to navigate this balance was a testament to his strategic brilliance. Every promotion, assignment, and responsibility was considered not only in terms of operational efficiency but also in terms of potential psychological impact and loyalty reinforcement. Even in the quietest moments, Gilberto remained acutely aware of these internal pressures. Sitting in his office late at night, reviewing reports and evaluating the performance of operatives, he would consider not only the logistics of shipments and finances but the subtle undercurrents of human behavior. Who might be tempted by ambition? Who might feel slighted or underappreciated? Who could be influenced, guided, or subtly corrected? These questions were as central to his strategy as planning international shipments or managing law enforcement scrutiny. The chess player's approach to internal tensions combined observation, strategy, and subtle reinforcement of hierarchy. By anticipating challenges, rewarding loyalty, mitigating ambition, and maintaining clear communication, he created an organization that remained remarkably stable despite the immense pressures of a global criminal empire. Internal friction, while inevitable, was managed with a quiet, deliberate hand, ensuring that the cartel's outward operations continued seamlessly even as human complexities played out beneath the surface. As night falls over Cali, one can imagine Gilberto walking the quiet halls of his estate, considering the delicate balance of power, loyalty, and ambition within his organization. The city sleeps peacefully, unaware of the intricate dynamics of one of the world's most sophisticated criminal empires. Gilberto's mind, like a master chessboard, weighs every potential move, contingency, and outcome. In the quiet, he ensures that even the cracks within his empire do not threaten the integrity of the whole. The chess player knows that true power lies not only in wealth, influence, and strategy, but in the careful management of human nature, and it is this subtle mastery that has allowed the Cali Cartel to endure. As the Cali Cartel's influence grew, it became increasingly clear that power was not only exercised through operations, wealth, or loyalty, but through the subtle manipulation of political systems. Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela, ever the chess player, understood that true security and expansion required more than controlling shipments or finances. It required influence over the very institutions that might challenge him. Politics, government, and law enforcement were not obstacles to be confronted directly, but instruments to be guided, shaped, and occasionally softened to create stability for the empire he had quietly constructed. Political corruption, in the context of the Cali Cartel, was less about spectacle and more about precision. Bribes were strategic, carefully calibrated to achieve maximum effect with minimal risk. Politicians were approached with subtlety, their interests understood and gently aligned with the cartel's objectives. The goal was not to dominate publicly, but to create a network of influence in which key figures would act, consciously or unconsciously, in ways that protected or advanced the cartel's operations. Gilberto recognized that invisible control often proved far more enduring than overt intimidation. The cartel's infiltration of political systems extended across local, regional, and national levels. Officials who might influence law enforcement priorities, regulatory oversight, or financial scrutiny were approached discreetly. Meetings were private, favors carefully documented, and loyalty quietly reinforced. Gilberto's strategic mind treated these relationships as critical pieces on the chessboard. Each politician or official represented a potential advantage if properly understood and managed. By cultivating trust, leveraging information, and applying subtle persuasion, he created a buffer of protection around the organization, allowing operations to continue with minimal interference. The interplay between corruption and influence also involved understanding human psychology. Gilberto carefully observed motivations, fears, and desires, tailoring interactions to achieve cooperation without unnecessary exposure. He recognized that overt threats could backfire, creating resistance, scrutiny, or betrayal. Instead, influence was cultivated like a garden, small, consistent efforts that nurtured relationships and encouraged behavior beneficial to the cartel. Loyalty, gratitude, or even dependence could all be harnessed to ensure that the organization's interests were safeguarded in the corridors of power. Financial leverage played a subtle but crucial role. Campaign contributions, investment opportunities, and strategic support allowed Gilberto to align the interests of key political and business figures with the cartel's long-term goals. These arrangements were meticulously structured to minimize risk while maximizing influence. In many cases, officials became allies without ever fully realizing the extent of the cartel's reach, their decisions guided by incentives that appeared natural, convenient, or mutually beneficial. This quiet orchestration of influence became a hallmark of Gilberto's genius, power exercised with discretion, patience, and subtlety. Beyond direct influence, the cartel shaped perception through philanthropy, public works, and social investments. Schools, hospitals, and community programs, quietly funded by the cartel, created goodwill and loyalty among local populations. In turn, this indirect influence reached officials, journalists, and civic leaders who observed these contributions as evidence of benevolence and legitimacy. The chess player understood that perception is as critical as reality. By shaping the environment in which officials operated, he reduced scrutiny and reinforced stability without drawing attention. International politics also came into play. As the cartel's operations reached Europe, North America, and other regions, Gilberto engaged in careful observation of foreign policy, law enforcement priorities, and international trade regulations. Alliances with intermediaries, legal advisors, and business partners allowed the cartel to navigate foreign political landscapes effectively. This global dimension of influence was executed quietly, with strategic foresight, ensuring that operations remained profitable and secure across multiple jurisdictions. Internal management of political influence was equally precise. Key operatives were entrusted with maintaining relationships, reporting developments, and assessing risk, while oversight remained centralized with Gilberto. This combination of delegation and control ensured that the network of influence was coherent, consistent, and resilient. By embedding the philosophy of patience, discretion, and foresight into his operatives, he created an organization capable of maintaining political leverage even as operations grew more complex. The subtle power of political corruption also provided a sense of psychological security. Knowing that officials, regulators, and law enforcement could be influenced reduced uncertainty and allowed Gilberto to focus on strategic growth rather than reactive defense. This calm, measured approach minimized mistakes, maintained operational continuity, and reinforced the organization's confidence. In essence, influence over politics became another piece of the chessboard, allowing the cartel to maneuver with precision, protect its interests, and anticipate potential obstacles before they became threats. As night blankets the city of Cali, one can imagine Gilberto reflecting on the invisible threads that connect his empire to the halls of power. From quiet offices and private meetings to careful financial arrangements and social investments, every element of political influence has been cultivated with foresight and care. The chess player's genius lies not in spectacle or confrontation, but in the subtle orchestration of complex relationships, the patient cultivation of loyalty, and the quiet exercise of power behind the scenes. Through this invisible hand, the cartel's operations are protected, its influence extended, and its legacy quietly secured. By mastering political corruption and influence, Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela demonstrated that control extends beyond money, territory, or loyalty. It resides in the ability to shape environments, anticipate decisions, and guide outcomes with subtlety and precision. The chess player's empire, both seen and unseen, thrived not through force alone, but through the careful, patient, and deliberate application of intelligence, foresight, and quiet authority. In the stillness of night, one senses the depth of this power, silent, pervasive, and profoundly strategic, ensuring that the Cali Cartel could endure in a world defined by uncertainty, competition, and ever-present risk. By the early 1990s, the Cali Cartel's operations had transcended the borders of Colombia, evolving into a sophisticated network that spanned continents and oceans. Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela, the chess player, understood that true power in the criminal world depended not merely on local dominance, but on the ability to navigate and control a complex, global web of drug trade. The logistics, finances, alliances, and risks involved were immense, requiring a level of precision, foresight, and coordination that few could match. This expansion marked a critical phase in the cartel's history, revealing both the brilliance and the immense challenges of orchestrating a worldwide empire. The global drug trade operated as a multi-layered system, with shipments moving from production regions in Colombia to distribution networks across North America, Europe, and beyond. Every stage required meticulous planning, routes had to be selected, timing coordinated, and contingencies prepared for unpredictable obstacles such as law enforcement, rival organizations, or logistical failures. Gilberto's role was to oversee the system as a whole, ensuring that each component operated smoothly while remaining integrated into the broader strategy of the cartel. It was a delicate balance, akin to moving pieces across an enormous chessboard, where a single misstep could have cascading consequences. One of the key challenges of global expansion was maintaining discretion. Unlike local operations, which could be monitored personally, international networks required layers of trusted intermediaries. These operatives had to be both competent and reliable, capable of executing complex transactions without compromising security. Communication systems were carefully designed to prevent leaks, and operational protocols were rigorously enforced. The chess players' attention to detail ensured that, despite the vast scope of operations, the organization maintained remarkable control and minimized exposure. Financial management became increasingly critical with global expansion. Money flowed across borders in enormous volumes, necessitating sophisticated laundering strategies to integrate profits into legitimate systems. Shell companies, banking networks, and investment portfolios were used strategically to mask the origin of funds, protect the organization from scrutiny, and ensure liquidity for ongoing operations. Gilberto understood that financial stability was the backbone of the empire. Without careful management, even the most successful shipments and alliances could falter under legal or economic pressure. Alliances, too, were crucial in maintaining the flow of the global drug trade. Partnerships with foreign distributors, transport operators, and financial intermediaries allowed the cartel to operate in multiple regions simultaneously. Gilberto cultivated these relationships with the same patience and strategic insight that characterized all aspects of his leadership. Trust was earned gradually, with careful observation and verification of competence and loyalty. By fostering reliable networks abroad, the cartel extended its influence and reinforced its resilience, ensuring that international operations could continue even if local disruptions occurred. Risk management became a central focus during this period. The further operations reached from the heart of the organization in Cali, the greater the potential for disruption. Political instability, law enforcement investigations, rival organizations, and logistical failures were constant threats. Gilberto's approach combined anticipation, contingency planning, and discreet intervention. Each shipment, financial transaction, and partnership was assessed for potential vulnerabilities, with multiple safeguards in place to reduce exposure and maintain continuity. In this way, risk became a factor to be calculated rather than feared. Despite the inherent dangers of global operations, the Cali Cartel thrived due to its sophisticated organization, strategic leadership, and disciplined approach. Unlike rivals who relied on visibility, violence, or impulsive expansion, Gilberto emphasized discretion, patience, and long-term sustainability. Each move was calculated, each decision weighed for immediate and future consequences. The chess player's philosophy was evident in every aspect of the global trade: careful positioning, risk management, and the ability to respond to unexpected developments without panic. The human element remained central to success. Trustworthy operatives were deployed in every region, trained to handle complex negotiations, financial arrangements, and security protocols. Loyalty and competence were continually assessed, and underperformance or disloyalty was addressed quietly but firmly. Gilberto's ability to maintain cohesion across continents demonstrated not only his strategic genius, but also his understanding of the subtle dynamics of power, influence, and human behavior. Global expansion also reinforced the contrast between perception and reality. From the outside, the cartel's operations appeared invisible, businesses operated, cities thrived, and law enforcement had limited insight. Behind the scenes, however, an intricate system of production, transportation, distribution, and finance functioned with remarkable precision. The chess player's genius lay in maintaining this delicate balance, creating a worldwide empire that was both immensely powerful and largely undetectable, operating in the shadows while shaping markets and influencing systems across continents. As night falls over Cali and beyond, one can imagine Gilberto reviewing reports from multiple countries, assessing the performance of shipments, evaluating alliances, and anticipating potential challenges. Every decision, every adjustment, every move on the global chessboard is made with the same calm, deliberate focus that defined his leadership. The scope of operations is immense, but the strategy remains simple in principle: patience, foresight, and precise execution ensure that the empire continues to function smoothly, even under complex and unpredictable conditions. Through this global expansion, Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela solidified the Cali Cartel's position as one of the most sophisticated and resilient criminal organizations in history. The combination of operational excellence, strategic foresight, financial acumen, and disciplined leadership allowed the cartel to thrive despite challenges that might have destroyed lesser organizations. The chess player's ability to manage complexity, anticipate risk, and maintain cohesion across continents is a testament to the quiet brilliance that defined his rule. In the calm of night, the city sleeps unaware of the intricate network that spans oceans, connecting distant ports, warehouses, and financial systems into a single, coordinated empire. It is a reminder that power is not always visible, that influence can be exercised quietly and decisively, and that true mastery lies in the ability to control complexity with patience, intelligence, and foresight. The global drug trade, in the hands of Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela, became not just a source of wealth, but a reflection of strategic genius, a network that functioned seamlessly because the chess player had envisioned every move, prepared for every contingency, and maintained control across continents. Even as the Cali Cartel thrived, a quiet tension lingered in the shadows, born of rivalries and the ever-present threat of conflict. The criminal world, by its very nature, is never entirely peaceful, and Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela understood that expansion and influence inevitably drew the attention of competitors. Unlike some organizations whose battles were marked by open violence and spectacle, the conflicts surrounding the Cali Cartel were often subtle, strategic, and deeply complex. Silent wars fought in boardrooms, across borders, and within the hidden corridors of influence. Rivalries emerged from multiple directions. Competing cartels, particularly the remnants of the Medellin cartel after Pablo Escobar's fall, and smaller regional gangs sought to challenge the cartel's dominance. These adversaries ranged from violent opportunists to sophisticated operators with their own networks of influence and connections. Each posed a unique threat, and the chess player recognized that a misstep could destabilize years of careful planning. The approach, therefore, had to be measured, strategic, and, above all, controlled. Rather than responding with impulsive aggression, Gilberto relied on negotiation, intelligence, and the subtle exertion of influence. He understood that conflict could be more effectively managed through diplomacy, economic leverage, and carefully calibrated pressure. Rival factions were observed, assessed, and, where possible, co-opted or neutralized through indirect means. This approach minimized unnecessary violence, maintained stability, and reinforced the cartel's reputation as both powerful and inscrutable. In essence, he turned potential threats into opportunities for strategic advantage. The chess player also understood that timing was everything in these silent wars. Aggressive action taken too early could provoke escalation, delayed action could be interpreted as weakness. Gilberto's decisions were guided by careful observation, intelligence gathering, and long-term calculation. Each move was considered in the context of potential reactions, long-term consequences, and the broader strategic landscape. This patience allowed the cartel to maintain dominance without engaging in needless or conspicuous conflict, reinforcing the perception of power without drawing undue attention. Intelligence became a central tool in managing rivalries. Operatives were tasked with gathering information on competitors' movements, alliances, and intentions. Wiretaps, surveillance, and trusted informants provided insights that allowed Gilberto to anticipate challenges before they became immediate threats. This quiet accumulation of knowledge created a buffer of foresight, enabling the cartel to maneuver strategically, avoiding surprises and seizing opportunities with precision. The chess player's ability to process and act upon this intelligence was a defining feature of his leadership. At the same time, internal unity was critical in managing external threats. Rivalries often exploited cracks within organizations, looking for signs of weakness, betrayal, or discord. Gilberto's emphasis on loyalty, discipline, and strategic cohesion ensured that the cartel presented a united front. Operatives understood their roles, maintained clear lines of communication, and adhered to established protocols, reducing the risk that internal vulnerabilities could be exploited by rivals. In this way, internal stability became both a shield and a weapon in the silent wars that surrounded the cartel. Economic leverage also played a role in managing conflict. The cartel's vast wealth allowed for strategic incentives, investments, and agreements that could neutralize potential adversaries without resorting to violence. Competitors could be drawn into mutually beneficial arrangements, persuaded through financial opportunity, or subtly co-opted into the cartel's sphere of influence. In Gilberto's mind, power was not solely measured by control or coercion, but by the ability to shape outcomes, align interests, and reduce resistance through strategic foresight. Yet, despite these strategies, the threat of violence always lingered. Rival factions, lawless elements, and unpredictable events could erupt into confrontation at any moment. The chess player mitigated this risk through preparation, contingency planning, and careful oversight of operational security. Safe houses, secure communications, and discreet transportation networks ensured that even if conflict arose, the cartel could respond efficiently, minimize exposure, and maintain its core operations. Every potential flashpoint was anticipated, assessed, and addressed before it could escalate. The contrast between the calm composure of Gilberto's leadership and the silent turbulence of rivalries underscores his strategic brilliance. While threats loomed in the shadows, his outward demeanor remained measured, deliberate, and unshakable. This equilibrium conveyed authority, reinforced confidence within the organization, and subtly deterred rivals from overt confrontation. Power, in this sense, was not asserted through spectacle or terror, but through the quiet mastery of strategy, anticipation, and foresight. As night envelopes Cali, one can imagine Gilberto reviewing intelligence reports, analyzing rival movements, and considering responses with meticulous care. The chess player moves pieces on a vast, invisible board, anticipating the reactions of competitors, allies, and potential threats alike. His strategy combines observation, patience, and subtle influence, ensuring that conflict is managed with precision and efficiency, often without any public display of force. In this way, the cartel maintains dominance while avoiding unnecessary exposure or escalation. Ultimately, the silent wars surrounding the Cali Cartel reveal the delicate balance between power and restraint, influence and risk. Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela's approach to rivalries demonstrates that strength lies not in reckless aggression, but in foresight, strategic intelligence, and the quiet orchestration of complex dynamics. Every move is deliberate, every interaction calculated, and every potential threat assessed. Through this mastery of silent conflict, the chess player ensures that the empire he has built remains resilient, stable, and formidable, even in a world defined by danger, competition, and unpredictability. As the 1990s progressed, the quiet confidence of the Cali Cartel began to encounter a formidable challenge, an intensifying law enforcement crackdown. Years of meticulous planning, discretion, and careful orchestration had allowed the cartel to operate with remarkable freedom, but the increasing sophistication and determination of international and Colombian authorities introduced a new layer of tension. Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela, the chess player, understood that this was not a crisis to be feared but a complex challenge to be navigated with patience, intelligence, and foresight. The crackdown emerged gradually, like the slow approach of a storm on the horizon. Investigations intensified, surveillance networks expanded, and coordination between agencies across borders became increasingly effective. The DEA, Colombian authorities, and international partners pooled resources, analyzed financial trails, and tracked shipments with unprecedented precision. For the first time, the invisible empire that Gilberto had built was under sustained scrutiny. The chess player recognized that even a small lapse could have wide-reaching consequences, and every aspect of the organization had to be reviewed, reinforced, and secured. Gilberto's response was methodical. Rather than panicking or reacting impulsively, he assessed the scope of the pressure, identified vulnerabilities, and implemented subtle adjustments to operations. Shipments were rerouted, communication protocols tightened, and financial movements further concealed. Operatives were briefed carefully, loyalty reinforced, and contingencies established to address potential disruptions. In essence, the cartel was engaged in a high-stakes game of adaptation, adjusting each move to remain several steps ahead of the authorities without revealing the full scale of the empire. The sophistication of law enforcement efforts introduced a quiet tension into the organization. Operatives were aware of the growing pressure, and while their confidence remained grounded in loyalty and experience, the constant possibility of surveillance or infiltration demanded vigilance. Gilberto's calm demeanor became a stabilizing force. By maintaining measured leadership, providing guidance, and reinforcing operational discipline, he ensured that anxiety did not escalate into chaos. The chess player knew that the human element was as critical as logistical or financial considerations in maintaining resilience under pressure. Financial tracking and investigation became a particular point of focus for authorities. The layers of legitimate business, shell companies, and international banking structures that had once concealed the cartel's wealth were increasingly scrutinized. In response, Gilberto directed careful restructuring of financial networks, ensuring that the flow of funds remained protected while reducing exposure. Each transaction, investment, and partnership was reassessed, with contingencies in place to minimize detection. Wealth, in this phase, was both a shield and a potential vulnerability, requiring constant attention and strategic oversight. The political dimension of the crackdown was equally significant. As awareness of the cartel's activities grew, pressures on local and national officials intensified. Gilberto's long-cultivated network of influence became a critical buffer, allowing him to manage scrutiny, negotiate outcomes discreetly, and maintain a measure of operational continuity. Influence, discretion, and foresight became essential tools in navigating the dual challenges of legal enforcement and political exposure. The chess player's mastery of subtle persuasion and strategic alignment proved indispensable in this period of heightened tension. Security measures were further enhanced to mitigate risk. Safe houses, secure communication channels, and transportation protocols were reinforced, creating layers of protection for both leadership and operatives. Gilberto understood that visibility, even in small measures, could compromise operations. Therefore, each movement, each meeting, and each decision was calibrated to maintain both discretion and efficiency. The chess player's awareness of operational vulnerability was constant, guiding every adjustment in real time to maintain stability. Despite the mounting pressure, the cartel maintained remarkable composure. Operations continued, shipments moved, and financial networks remained largely intact. The contrast between the outward calm of leadership and the invisible tension of scrutiny illustrates the cartel's unique sophistication. Gilberto's ability to absorb external pressure while maintaining internal coherence was a testament to his strategic brilliance. The chess player's philosophy, patience, calculation, and measured adaptation, enabled the organization to endure in the face of challenges that might have undone less disciplined groups. This period also highlighted the importance of intelligence. The cartel invested in monitoring the monitoring agencies themselves, gathering insights about investigations, tracking investigative focus, and anticipating potential threats. By observing law enforcement patterns, assessing vulnerabilities, and predicting next moves, Gilberto could implement preemptive measures. Knowledge became power, and foresight transformed the seemingly unstoppable pressure into manageable, calculable risk. As night descends over Cali and beyond, one can imagine Gilberto sitting quietly in his office, reviewing intelligence reports, assessing operational adjustments, and contemplating the chessboard of law enforcement moves. Every potential development is weighed carefully, every decision measured for both immediate and long-term impact. The calm of night contrasts with the silent intensity of the challenge, reflecting the duality of the chess player's genius, composed, strategic, and prepared to navigate complexity without haste or panic. Ultimately, the law enforcement crackdown represented both a test and an opportunity. It tested the resilience, cohesion, and adaptability of the cartel, while also providing Gilberto the chance to demonstrate the full depth of his strategic mastery. Through careful planning, discreet adjustments, and the patient orchestration of operations, he ensured that the organization could withstand scrutiny, continue functioning, and even turn challenges into avenues for reinforcing control. The chess player's calm authority, foresight, and precision in this period exemplify why Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela remained one of the most sophisticated criminal strategists of his time. After years of strategic brilliance, careful discretion, and meticulous orchestration, the Cali Cartel began to encounter cracks in its seemingly impenetrable armor. The law enforcement pressure that Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela had managed with such calm efficiency started to intensify, and the quiet tension that had been present for years began to evolve into tangible challenges. The chess player, for all his foresight and meticulous planning, now faced a period where the equilibrium he had maintained was tested, and the empire he had built began to show signs of vulnerability. The first signs of the cartel's vulnerability were subtle, almost imperceptible at first. A shipment delayed here, a trusted operative acting cautiously there, minor fluctuations in financial flow, all indicators that the external pressure was beginning to touch the inner workings of the organization. Gilberto, ever observant, immediately noted these anomalies. He understood that what seemed minor could quickly escalate into greater instability if left unchecked. In his mind, each small detail was a piece of a larger puzzle, and the unfolding pressures required careful recalibration of strategy. Law enforcement had become increasingly sophisticated in their approach. Intelligence sharing between agencies, undercover operations, and financial audits were reaching a level of precision that even the most cautious operatives could not completely evade. The cartel's previously impenetrable networks were now being examined piece by piece, revealing patterns and connections that could not remain hidden indefinitely. For the first time in years, Gilberto was forced to confront the reality that no empire, however well managed, is invincible. Simultaneously, internal vulnerabilities began to surface. Years of loyalty and discipline could not entirely suppress human frailty. Stress, fear, and ambition created subtle tensions among operatives. The ever-present awareness that exposure was now more likely prompted missteps, oversights, and, in some cases, betrayal. The chess player's careful cultivation of loyalty and order was being tested against the natural pressures of a heightened threat environment. Gilberto responded with measured interventions, reinforcing discipline, adjusting responsibilities, and maintaining morale, but he recognized that the challenges ahead required more than routine management, they demanded adaptability and strategic foresight of the highest order. Financial pressures also began to emerge. The layers of legitimate businesses, shell companies, and investment networks that had previously concealed vast amounts of revenue were being scrutinized more closely than ever. Transactions that once seemed invisible were now leaving trails, and the cartel had to quickly adapt its financial strategies to prevent exposure. Gilberto orchestrated the restructuring of assets, the movement of capital, and the reinforcement of laundering mechanisms with precision, understanding that even a single oversight could unravel years of careful planning. Perhaps most crucially, the global scale of the cartel became a liability under intense scrutiny. International shipments, previously coordinated with near-perfect timing and discretion, now faced increased interception, delays, and risk. Partners abroad, once reliable, began to express caution, understanding that law enforcement presence was growing more effective. The chess player had to manage these complexities without panic, recalibrating routes, adjusting logistics, and maintaining trust and coordination across continents. Each adjustment was a careful balance of operational necessity and risk management, executed with the calm precision that had defined Gilberto's leadership for decades. The mounting pressure was not solely operational, it carried psychological weight. Gilberto, while calm and composed outwardly, now faced the reality that the empire he had controlled with such deft skill was under a level of scrutiny that even his foresight could not fully anticipate. The tension of knowing that any miscalculation could trigger cascading consequences weighed heavily, yet he maintained his signature poise. Like a master chess player facing an unexpected move from an opponent, he adjusted his strategy, reassessed his position, and prepared the next series of calculated responses. At the same time, law enforcement breakthroughs, combined with insider leaks and defections, began to erode the cartel's secrecy. Investigators pieced together information that had previously been concealed, gaining insights into financial structures, shipping networks, and internal hierarchies. This new visibility was a critical threat, signaling that the empire was no longer as invisible as it once seemed. For Gilberto, it was a signal to act decisively, yet subtly, reinforcing protections, managing risks, and adapting operational practices to the evolving landscape. The contrast between the quiet calm of Gilberto's personal demeanor and the growing pressure on his empire underscores the chess player's strategic approach. While the cartel faced tangible threats, he maintained composure, making decisions with clarity and patience rather than reacting impulsively. Every contingency was considered, every adjustment measured, and every interaction calculated to preserve both operational integrity and morale. Even as cracks began to appear, the cartel retained a degree of resilience, a testament to the foresight and discipline that had guided its rise. As night settles over Cali, one can imagine Gilberto sitting in reflective silence, reviewing intelligence reports, assessing vulnerabilities, and contemplating the unfolding pressures. Each detail is examined carefully: the movement of shipments, the reliability of operatives, the scrutiny of authorities, and the subtle shifts in rival dynamics. In these quiet hours, the chess player plans, adjusts, and prepares for the next series of moves, knowing that the survival of the empire depends not on reaction, but on foresight, strategy, and precise execution. Ultimately, this phase marked the beginning of a transformation in the cartel's history. The pressures of law enforcement, internal strain, and global complexity signaled that the empire was entering a period where brilliance, adaptability, and strategic patience would be tested as never before. Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela's genius lay in his ability to navigate these challenges with calm authority, maintaining cohesion and control even as the foundations of the empire faced unprecedented stress. The chess player's enduring skill was not merely in building power, but in managing its vulnerabilities, a subtle and profound demonstration of leadership under pressure. The quiet tension that had long defined the Cali Cartel's operations eventually culminated in one of the most significant turning points in its history: the arrests and trials that marked the fall of Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela, the chess player. After decades of meticulous planning, subtle manipulation, and strategic foresight, the empire that he had so carefully orchestrated began to unravel under the relentless pressure of coordinated law enforcement efforts. This period was characterized not by dramatic gunfights or public spectacles, but by a slow, deliberate exposure of vulnerabilities, and the inexorable tightening of legal nets around the cartel's leadership. The initial arrest was the result of years of painstaking investigation. International agencies, Colombian authorities, and specialized task forces had been gradually piecing together the cartel's intricate networks, analyzing financial trails, surveillance reports, and the behavior of operatives. For decades, Gilberto had remained several steps ahead, relying on his intelligence, discretion, and influence. Yet, the accumulation of information, combined with defections and insider accounts, created a mosaic that could no longer remain obscured. In the early morning hours of a carefully planned operation, law enforcement quietly moved in, and the chess player was apprehended, his empire poised on the edge of a dramatic transformation. The arrest itself was a moment of quiet gravity, devoid of the chaos often associated with the capture of criminal figures. Gilberto, ever composed, maintained his calm, meeting the moment with the same measured presence that had defined his leadership. For those who had observed him over the years, there was no panic, no outburst, only the serene acknowledgement of a situation that required thought, calculation, and adaptation. In that calm demeanor lay the essence of the chess player. Even at the precipice of collapse, he maintained control over his own actions, aware that composure could influence perception, both in the eyes of authorities and the public. Once in custody, the legal battles began. The trials that followed were complex, spanning multiple jurisdictions and involving extensive documentation of the cartel's operations. Prosecutors sought to expose the intricate networks of finance, influence, and logistics that had allowed the Cali Cartel to function undisturbed for so long. Evidence accumulated over years: bank records, intercepted communications, testimonies from former associates, and painted a comprehensive picture of the organization's scope and sophistication. Gilberto, however, approached the courtroom with strategic awareness, understanding that even legal proceedings were a game of calculated moves, where patience, demeanor, and selective presentation of information could influence outcomes. The trials also revealed the human dimension of power and consequence. Operatives who had once followed Gilberto's directives with unwavering loyalty now faced their own legal jeopardy, and the pressure of potential sentences created tension, fear, and uncertainty. Witnesses, informants, and former associates contributed to a complex narrative of cooperation and betrayal, illustrating the fragility of human loyalty under extreme pressure. For Gilberto, these proceedings were both a challenge and a testament to the organization he had built, its complexity, its reach, and its reliance on human discretion and trust. Financial scrutiny became a central theme of the legal process. The once invisible flow of funds, carefully laundered and integrated into legitimate businesses, was now exposed to intense examination. Prosecutors traced transactions across borders, dissected investments, and revealed the systemic sophistication of the cartel's money management. Gilberto, in response, emphasized procedural precision, worked closely with legal counsel, and relied on his deep understanding of both domestic and international law to navigate the complex terrain. Even in confinement, his strategic mind continued to operate, evaluating risks, anticipating moves, and seeking avenues to mitigate exposure. The trials were not only about evidence and legal strategy but also about perception. Media attention, public opinion, and political pressure added layers of complexity to an already intricate process. Gilberto's calm demeanor and composed presentation contrasted sharply with the dramatic narratives often constructed by the press, reinforcing the image of a man whose intelligence and foresight remained intact even in adversity. By maintaining this presence, he subtly influenced the narrative surrounding his prosecution, emphasizing the strategic, rather than impulsive, nature of his operations. Behind the courtroom proceedings, the cartel itself faced further unraveling. Leadership vacuums, the loss of operational guidance, and the pressure of investigations created instability. Operatives and associates, accustomed to the steady hand of the chess player, now had to navigate uncertainty, adjust operations, and respond to emerging threats. The delicate balance of control that had allowed the cartel to function with remarkable coherence was disrupted, illustrating the centrality of Gilberto's leadership to the organization's enduring stability. Even in the shadow of legal defeat, the chess player's influence persisted. The strategies, structures, and systems he had established continued to guide remaining operations, ensuring that the organization retained a measure of coherence despite the extraordinary pressures. His ability to anticipate threats, cultivate loyalty, and implement complex operational protocols had created a legacy of resilience that extended beyond his immediate freedom. The arrest and trials, while a profound challenge, also illuminated the depth of his strategic foresight. As night falls over the city of Cali, one can imagine Gilberto in his cell, quietly reviewing the chain of events, reflecting on decades of calculated decisions, and considering the moves that lie ahead. The chess player remains, in essence, a strategist navigating constraints, assessing risks, and contemplating solutions with calm deliberation. The empire may be exposed, the empire may be threatened, but the mind behind it continues to operate with precision, patience, and awareness, a testament to the enduring genius of Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela. Ultimately, this period marked the transition from quiet dominance to exposure and vulnerability. The arrests and trials were not merely legal milestones, they were the manifestation of decades of strategy colliding with the inexorable machinery of law enforcement and justice. Gilberto's calm, deliberate approach, his strategic patience, and his capacity to navigate complexity under pressure demonstrate why he remained a figure of remarkable intellect and subtle power, even as the empire he built faced its most profound challenge. Following his arrest and the onset of a series of trials, Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela faced a new reality, life behind bars. The world he had once controlled with careful precision, spanning continents, political corridors, and global trade networks, was now reduced to the confined spaces of a prison cell. For the chess player, this was a profound shift, a dramatic change from the freedom and influence that had defined his decades-long reign. Yet, even in confinement, his mind remained alert, strategic, and ever observant, navigating this new environment with the same patience and foresight that had characterized his rise and rule. Incarceration brought with it both practical and psychological challenges. The routines of prison life were rigid and unyielding, a stark contrast to the flexible, controlled world Gilberto had once managed. Movements were monitored, interactions limited, and autonomy constrained. Yet, for someone like Gilberto, who had always viewed life through the lens of strategy, the constraints became a different kind of chessboard. Every interaction, every observation, every decision could be analyzed, understood, and leveraged to maintain influence, protect personal security, and plan for the future. One of the first challenges was the loss of direct control over the cartel's operations. The networks he had meticulously orchestrated now required intermediaries, trusted associates, and communication channels that were inherently less secure. Gilberto relied on patience, delegating responsibilities carefully, and maintaining oversight through discreet and calculated means. Even the smallest disruptions or lapses could have far-reaching consequences, so he remained vigilant, monitoring reports, evaluating trustworthiness, and providing strategic guidance wherever possible. The chess player adapted his leadership style to the limitations of confinement, proving that influence does not solely depend on physical freedom. Prison life also demanded psychological resilience. The environment was charged with tension, uncertainty, and potential threats. Fellow inmates, guards, and institutional pressures created a landscape where perception, composure, and awareness were critical for personal safety. Gilberto's calm, measured demeanor became a key tool in navigating these challenges. By maintaining an air of patience and intelligence, he discouraged unnecessary conflict and cultivated respect from those around him, ensuring that his reputation and personal security remained intact even in a drastically different world. Reflection became a central aspect of life behind bars. Removed from the constant activity of international operations, Gilberto had the opportunity to contemplate the trajectory of his life, the decisions that had defined his career, and the consequences of his actions. This period of introspection likely illuminated both the brilliance of his strategic foresight and the vulnerabilities that had ultimately led to his downfall. Such reflection, while inherently personal, also allowed for a calm, methodical approach to the challenges of incarceration, emphasizing patience, observation, and long-term thinking. The legal landscape continued to shift during this period. Appeals, negotiations, and adjustments to sentencing created an ongoing interplay between the justice system and Gilberto's strategic responses. Each development required careful analysis and measured action, demonstrating that even within the constraints of incarceration, the chess player's mind remained active, weighing options, predicting outcomes, and considering the optimal course of action. Strategy, in this context, became mental rather than operational, focused on influence, protection, and preparation rather than direct control of a criminal empire. Relationships within prison also required subtle navigation. Allies, adversaries, and neutral parties coexisted within a complex social hierarchy. Understanding motivations, anticipating behavior, and maintaining discretion were critical for both personal safety and continued influence. Gilberto applied the same principles that had governed his external empire: observation, careful assessment, and strategic intervention when necessary. Even in confinement, he was attuned to the dynamics of power, loyalty, and human behavior, ensuring that he remained a respected figure within the limited but intricate world of the prison. Despite the loss of physical freedom, the chess player continued to maintain a sense of mental sovereignty. Reading, reflection, and engagement with legal counsel provided intellectual stimulation and strategic preparation. By focusing on what could be controlled, the timing of appeals, the management of reputation, and the careful exercise of influence, Gilberto preserved a sense of agency. In this way, incarceration was not simply a period of defeat, it became a space for continued strategic thought, reflection, and preparation for whatever developments lay ahead. The contrast between the freedom he once commanded and the restrictions of prison life highlighted both the resilience of his intellect and the inevitability of consequence. The empire he had built, vast and sophisticated, had provided security, influence, and wealth for decades, yet it was not impervious to the pressures of law enforcement and legal systems. In the quiet of his cell, Gilberto likely contemplated this duality, understanding that mastery of strategy, while immensely powerful, could not eliminate all vulnerability. Such insight, while sobering, reinforced the lessons of patience, foresight, and measured action that had defined his life. As night falls within the walls of the prison, one can imagine Gilberto seated quietly, reviewing his thoughts, observing the rhythms of the institution, and planning subtle measures to maintain influence and security. The chess player's mind continues to operate with calm precision, turning constraints into opportunities for observation, reflection, and preparation. Even in confinement, he exemplifies the quiet resilience of a strategist who has spent a lifetime understanding the interplay of power, loyalty, and human behavior. Ultimately, life behind bars marked a new chapter in Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela's story, a chapter defined by reflection, adaptation, and mental fortitude. The chess player's influence, while physically constrained, persisted through careful thought, strategic oversight, and measured engagement with both legal and social dynamics. In the stillness of incarceration, the enduring intellect, foresight, and composure of Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela shine through, offering a testament to the power of the mind, the discipline of strategy, and the quiet resilience of a man who, even in confinement, remains a master of his own chessboard. As the final chapter of Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela's life unfolds, it invites a quiet and contemplative reflection on a man whose intelligence, patience, and subtlety defined an era in organized crime. Known as the chess player of the Cali Cartel, Gilberto's story is a study not merely of illicit power, but of extraordinary strategic thought. For decades, he orchestrated an empire that spanned continents, moved unimaginable sums of money, and influenced governments, all while maintaining a composed, almost serene presence. His life, in its complexity, provides a window into the duality of brilliance and consequence, ambition and restraint, influence and accountability, a narrative that continues to captivate, intrigue, and inspire reflection. Gilberto's influence on the world of organized crime remains unparalleled in its sophistication. Under his guidance, the Cali Cartel operated with precision, discretion, and an almost mechanical efficiency that contrasted sharply with the chaotic flamboyance of other criminal organizations of the era. Shipments were timed with impeccable accuracy, financial flows were structured to elude scrutiny, and alliances were cultivated with a patient, meticulous hand. His approach emphasized long-term planning over impulsive action, subtlety over spectacle, and intelligence over brute force. The chess player's genius lay not in dominance through fear, but in the quiet orchestration of systems that allowed his empire to thrive under the radar, shaping global narcotics networks with calm authority. The legacy of Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela is profoundly defined by contrasts. He was immensely powerful, yet understated. He controlled vast networks, yet maintained personal composure. He commanded loyalty, yet often operated behind the scenes. While many of his contemporaries relied on intimidation and violence, Gilberto's approach was cerebral, patient, and strategic. Power, in his hands, was exercised like a series of chess moves, deliberate, calculated, and with foresight that considered not only immediate gains, but long-term stability. This balance of discretion and control, ambition and patience, is central to understanding why he earned the nickname, the chess player, and why his legacy continues to be studied for its remarkable blend of intellect and influence. Reflection on his life also underscores the inevitability of consequence, even for those who operate with supreme intelligence. Despite decades of foresight, careful planning, and meticulous orchestration, the forces of law enforcement, human frailty, and chance converged to bring the empire to a halt. Arrest, trials, and eventual incarceration were not merely legal milestones, they were reminders that no system, however sophisticated, is entirely immune to external pressure. Yet even in defeat, Gilberto maintained his composure, demonstrating the enduring quality of his strategic mind. While the empire he built could be constrained or dismantled, the intellect that guided it remained unbroken. One of the most remarkable aspects of Gilberto's legacy is the way he combined human insight with operational brilliance. He understood the psychology of loyalty, the subtleties of negotiation, and the necessity of discretion in every facet of his organization. Operatives were guided not merely by orders, but by the systems and culture he had established, structures that emphasized trust, discipline, and careful observation. In this way, the cartel functioned as a living network, coordinated with precision, and capable of adaptation even under stress. Gilberto's leadership style demonstrates that the most enduring power often lies in foresight, influence, and strategic alignment rather than overt dominance. Even within the confines of incarceration, Gilberto's mind remained active, reflecting on past decisions, analyzing ongoing events, and considering how to maintain influence despite the severe limitations imposed on him. Confinement could restrict physical action, but it could not constrain intellect. He continued to plan, adapt, and evaluate, maintaining a mental sovereignty that few could rival. The chess player's capacity for observation and strategy did not end with his freedom, it persisted as a defining feature of his identity, illustrating that the true measure of power often resides in thought, analysis, and patience. The social and psychological dimensions of his legacy are equally important. Gilberto's life reminds us that leadership in complex organizations involves not only strategy and logistics, but also the careful management of human behavior. Trust, loyalty, morale, and discipline were as central to the cartel's longevity as operational sophistication. By cultivating these qualities, he maintained cohesion across continents, ensuring that his vision and systems could function even when direct oversight was impossible. His ability to navigate these human dynamics speaks to a depth of understanding that extended far beyond the transactional aspects of organized crime, touching upon principles of psychology, influence, and strategic leadership. At the same time, the consequences of his empire cannot be overlooked. The Cali Cartel's operations affected countless lives, through addiction, violence, corruption, and systemic disruption. Gilberto's legacy is therefore a complex tapestry, combining remarkable strategic brilliance with profound moral and societal implications. Understanding this duality is essential. It is the interplay between intellect and consequence, vision and ethics, influence and accountability that defines the full scope of his story. For those who study his life, it offers lessons not only in strategy and leadership, but in the sobering realities of power exercised in morally ambiguous or destructive arenas. In contemplating his final years, one must also consider the broader reflection his life invites. The chess player's story is a meditation on the nature of foresight, patience, and calculated decision-making. It illustrates how extraordinary influence can be achieved through intellect and subtlety rather than spectacle. It demonstrates that leadership is as much about strategy, perception, and timing as it is about direct control. And it reminds us that even the most carefully orchestrated plans are subject to forces beyond individual control, forces of law, chance, human behavior, and consequence. The chess player's legacy also emphasizes the enduring power of calm composure. Throughout his life, Gilberto approached challenges with measured patience, whether orchestrating international operations, managing rivalries, or navigating the pressures of law enforcement and incarceration. His ability to maintain serenity, to think several steps ahead, and to act with deliberate precision became hallmarks of his influence. Even as the empire he built crumbled under relentless scrutiny, his personal mastery of strategy and foresight remained intact, offering a quiet testament to the power of intellect and reflection. As night deepens and the world outside settles into silence, one can imagine Gilberto in contemplation, reviewing decades of calculated moves, assessing the lessons of triumph and vulnerability, and considering the subtle threads of influence that persist even in his absence from freedom. His life illustrates the intricate dance between power and restraint, influence and consequence, foresight and inevitability. The chess player's story is both a chronicle of extraordinary strategic mastery and a meditation on the limits of human control, offering insight into the interplay of intellect, ambition, and circumstance. Ultimately, Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela is remembered not only as a powerful figure in the world of organized crime, but as a strategist of extraordinary depth. He approached life as a chessboard, with every decision, every relationship, and every operational move carefully weighed. His story endures as a study in patience, foresight, and the art of calculated influence, demonstrating that true mastery lies not in impulsive action, but in thoughtful planning and disciplined execution. The empire may have fallen, but the principles and strategies that defined its construction continue to offer lessons in leadership, strategy, and human behavior. The chess player's life also encourages reflection on the enduring consequences of ambition. His strategic genius enabled decades of dominance, yet the eventual downfall reminds us that even the most brilliant minds are subject to external pressures, unforeseen developments, and the limits of control. There is a profound duality in his legacy. It is both a celebration of intellect and a cautionary tale about the responsibilities and consequences that accompany extraordinary influence. For those who listen, it serves as a meditation on foresight, adaptability, and the quiet mastery of complex systems. In the stillness of night, as one drifts toward sleep, it is possible to envision the contours of Gilberto's empire, the subtle strategies that guided it, and the calm intelligence with which he orchestrated every move. The chess player is gone from the operational world, yet the echoes of his intellect, foresight, and strategic mastery remain. His life stands as a reminder that influence is often exercised quietly, that power can be maintained through thought rather than spectacle, and that the true legacy of a strategist lies in the enduring imprint of their decisions, the resilience of their systems, and the subtle lessons that continue long after the pieces have been moved. In this final reflection, Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela is remembered as a master strategist, a patient architect of power, and a figure whose life offers enduring insight into the intersection of intellect, ambition, and consequence. The chess player's legacy persists not only in the history of organized crime but in the study of strategy itself, a story of foresight, discipline, and the quiet brilliance of a mind that navigated extraordinary challenges with calm precision. His empire may have been dismantled, his freedom constrained, but the lessons of his life, the patterns of his strategy, and the mark of his intellect remain, a story to contemplate, to learn from, and to carry in thought as the night deepens and sleep gently descends.